Hi everybody, so most of you know me, I'm Janine. We just wanted to do a couple of videos just to give you some information around coping with stress and anxiety and depression during the coronavirus outbreak. And then we'll post another one as well around managing yourself if you are self-isolating. You probably already know I'm in self-isolation at the moment due to a raised temperature and a bad cough. Luckily, my temperature's coming down, which is great. Okay, so just to kind of, if anybody doesn't know, I'm a mental health practitioner and a psychological wellbeing practitioner. So hopefully we should have some skills and techniques that might be able to help help you out. So the first one that we're going to kind of talk about is stress and anxiety. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of stress around already around the coronavirus before even people may have been getting symptoms. So around things like whether your workplace is going to close, what you're going to do with your family, whether other people are contagious. So quite a lot of people were already stressed beforehand. And now obviously we had the information yesterday from Boris that we're now in the delay phase. So what's happening now is they're not testing people, and they are saying, if you have got symptoms, you do need to self-isolate. So it's kind of ramped up, I think, the anxiety and the stress around, and it kind of made people feel a little bit more worried, especially because they're not sure whether they should or they shouldn't self-isolate. So just before I go over some stress management techniques, just to reiterate, so if you have a temperature of 37.8, or if you're feeling like febrile, which means kind of like hot, sweaty, that kind of thing, to touch, you generally don't feel very well. Or you've got a new persistent cough or continuous cough. Now, what that means is a cough that is new to you. So some people will have a chronic cough that they've got with a condition. Now, that chronic cough is, it's not the same as a new cough. A new cough would be like in the last couple of weeks. And it's normally a dry cough, although there have been cases of a producing cough or a wet cough as well. So if you've got those symptoms, really you should be self-isolating, or either or of those symptoms, you should be self-isolating. So let's look at kind of stress and anxiety around the coronavirus. So first things first, now we'll kind of deal with the two separately in terms of people that are just out in the general community and people that are self-isolating. So when we want to think about stress and anxiety, what we need to remember is that with stress, we have good stress and we have bad stress. So we have kind of like the same things happen in our body biologically when we get stressed. So we have an adrenaline reaction, and that's normally in response to a trigger. So in this case, the coronavirus outbreak. So, the coronavirus outbreak, however you've heard about it, whatever you hear about it, it's going to trigger off a fight or flight response. So that's where our adrenaline gets released. Now, the first bit of this is trying to recognise whether you're being stressy about things or whether you're being affected. And one way of doing that is noticing symptoms of stress. So things like feeling dizzy, hot, sweaty, shaky, on edge, blurry vision, maybe upset stomach, sore stomach, nausea, heart racing, palpitations, just generally feeling tense. Those are all kind of physical symptoms of being under a stress reaction. And quite often we don't recognise these until they get to a point where we're kind of out of control with them. So if we can try and get a little bit more, of control over those, or control over knowing those, we're more likely to be able to do something with them. Now, the problem is of course, if we have those symptoms, we more than likely are going to worry about what's happening to us. So we might give attention to those physical symptoms. And of course, what that does is it increases our adrenaline and makes those symptoms even worse. So we suddenly feel more and more ill and more hot, sweaty, shaky, that kind of thing. So you know, it's kind of like one of those bits where we're not going to ignore them, but we also don't want to pay attention to them. Now, I always use a analogy. I've been using it a lot recently. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen the Gremlins. So we want to think about it as Gizmo, you know, like we want to know he's there. We want to know where he is, but we definitely don't want to be pouring water on him or feeding him after 12 o'clock. And that's the same with anxiety. So we need to have an awareness of what's going on, and we need to have an awareness of what our triggers are. But we need to kind of try and not give it too much attention. So that's the first bit, is recognition. Now, there'll be lots of different worrying thoughts as well, and you've probably maybe recognised a lot of these. So things like, what's going to happen? Am I going to get it? Am I going to be unwell? Am my family going to be unwell? Might I don't know, become really unwell with it? What's going to happen at work? Am I going to have enough money? So on and so forth. So those are, again, going to drive an adrenaline reaction and increase the likelihood of you panicking and you stressing. So let's come to some management techniques. Now, first things first, we've said, recognise the triggers. Try and make sure that you're recognising the triggers and that you're realising what it is that might set you off. Now, if we do that, then one of the things we can do is try and limit the impact our triggers have on us. So, for example, if you are noticing that watching a lot of different media, scrolling through Facebook, checking up on things, checking your temperature, that kind of thing, probably need to try and get a little bit more control over those things. So we can't control what other people do. So we can't control the posts on Facebook. We can't control the, we can't control what the media says. We can't control, what people around you say. So the important thing here is we can do something about what we can do stuff about. So the first thing we need to do is have a little think about, is it a good time to be looking at media? Are we looking at it too much? Are we looking at it appropriately? Are we taking what we need and using the facts? Now, obviously, we've got lots of different information coming out, and the best thing to do is to follow government guidelines. And if you are obviously unwell, to self-isolate. But if you have an existing medical condition, to consider taking preemptive measures. So it would make sense to kind of keep out of the way of people. Things like coughing into your elbow, making sure you're washing your hands regularly, that kind of thing. But generally trying to keep your distance. Now that's kind of moderate thinking. But if you are looking at media constantly, you're getting really obsessed with it, you're kind of really worrying about things, you're checking up on family, that would indicate that maybe you're doing, you're looking a bit too much into things. Maybe you need to take a bit of a step back. So recognise your triggers and have a think about whether we want to moderate them a bit. Now, that's not saying don't look at social media, is it? What it's saying is maybe think about things like, don't look at social media before you go to bed. Definitely don't look at it while you're in bed, or any kind of media around the coronavirus. Try and make sure that if you are looking at it, if you're feeling particularly anxious, maybe checking every 5 seconds might not help. Try and give yourself a time of day where you agree with yourself that you will check for regular updates and stick to that. Okay. Now that will help you to gain some more control over your anxiety. If certain people make you, or not make you, but you feel uncomfortable around them, then, look at moderation, look at thinking about, reducing the contact with them. If somebody's talking about it all the time and that's creating your anxiety, then maybe just speak to them for a little bit of a day. If it's family members, and you can't change your family, then what you need to do is try and think about whether you're in the right space to speak to them, and whether you need a bit of time away. Okay. So triggers are you kind of, obviously if you can remove a trigger of it altogether, do that, but most people can't remove a trigger out of the way because it's something that they need to continue doing, or they need to continue having contact with. So it's about being more kind to yourself and knowing when to do those things, when not to do those things. Okay. So let's move on to the next bit, really. Right, so there's some really, really good techniques for stress management, and they're really straightforward techniques without going too much into depth. And I'm going to focus on those today, because one thing we don't want to be doing is encouraging people to do quite in-depth kind of psychotherapeutic kind of approaches to things. It's there's already enough going on. So first things first is trying to be a little bit more mindful and putting ourselves into the situation. Now, some of you will maybe already practice mindfulness. Dead straightforward thing. We're just thinking about grounding ourselves and appreciating the here and now. So we're too busy normally thinking about what's going to happen in the future, what's happened before, So a lot of you might be panicking about what's going to happen with the coronavirus and so on, or who you've infected, or whether you've been infected. It's always the past and it's always the future. We're never living in the present. And what we need to try and do is to identify our stressors, is to live in the present and actually just pay attention to what's going on. So to be able to do that, really easy ways to think about our five senses. So what we can see, what we can hear, what we can taste, touch, and what we can smell. I'm glad I remembered those, because I sometimes forget, which is kind of concerning. So that helps us to really get ourselves back in the moment. Now, a regular practice of this for 5 minutes in the morning is a really good way of starting to reduce anxiety and stress. So I just simply spend 5 minutes in the morning looking out the window and have a think about what I can see, what I can hear, what I can taste, touch, and smell. You can do other techniques. So you could do the thing where you do, it's either 7 or 5, it doesn't matter, but 5 things you can taste, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can see, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can hear, or in whatever variation of those things that you want to do. It's the fact of the matter is, most of the time is actually stopping and just taking time rather than the exercise itself. Now, another one you can do is going around the room and describe everything. So everything you can see, the colour, what it might look like, what the texture's like, those kinds of things are really useful in getting under control with your anxiety. So these techniques, they can either be used as a routine thing, or they can be used as if you're in a crisis. Now, the important thing with that is, as in not a crisis is in a obviously towards ending your life crisis, although it can help then. In a crisis where you're panicking and you can't get back control of your panic or your anxiety, they can be really useful. But what we need to try and do is get them regularly practiced, because then they're easily accessible. So you've got all of those things. The other thing is you can use an object, like for example, I'm looking around, see if I've got one. I haven't, a glass bead or something similar, to enable you to kind of focus on how it feels, what it looks like, what the colour is. You could do some mindful colouring, that kind of thing. Now there's another way we could use some progressive muscle relaxation. Again, something I use every night, just before I go to bed, where we tense and release our toes all the way up to our tops of our head. And what we do is we want to notice the difference between the tension and the relaxation. So the reason that's really helpful is, obviously, if you are tense, sometimes we don't always recognise we're tense until we start getting pains, and we don't want that. So when we do progressive muscle relaxation, and I'll leave a link to it, we basically do start from our toes, and we tense and we hold, and then we release them. And we do that until we reach our head, and then we go all the way back down. And then the last little bit you can do with that is a little bit of imagery. So it's about looking in your mind's eye and thinking about a time or a place that you've enjoyed yourself, what you did, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can taste, what you can touch. So again, coming back to your 5 senses and really just putting yourself in a nice place. Okay, so those are kind of like straightforward techniques. There's lots of other techniques. For example, talking to somebody that's helpful and quite, balanced in the way that they approach things can be useful. You've got to just remember trying to get that balance right between reassurance seeking and, just getting some support. We're quite happy to take referrals for anybody who is suffering from anxiety or depression in regards to the coronavirus. You can contact us on 01900 663 75 and we can happily look to get you referred in. We'll be by telephone at the moment, obviously, because there's me in self isolation, or by Skype, or we possibly could get you seen face to face by one of our sport practitioners who's working from the Wellbeing Centre at the moment. Okay, so there are a couple of other techniques as well, like I mentioned. Now, one is to remember that you could use little cards to help you remember bits and pieces that, you are going to be okay. Most people are going to be okay from this virus. So you could put these in the back of your telephone, something similar, where you can access them. So things that just reassure you that things are going to be okay. Now, those can be really helpful, especially when you're not very good at reminding yourself and reassuring yourself that everything's okay. So, another one might be saying, remember to be factual, or remember to be balanced. So those are things that, they can be a really simple technique just to remind you to keep yourself back in check. Let me think, is there any other ones? Now, one of the biggest things, I think, and we'll touch a bit more on it in the next video to go into the self-isolation side of things, but even if you're not self-isolating, just be kind to yourself and have like almost like a little wellness toolkit. Again, we can help you with this if you need some support, but almost like a box of stuff that you can access to help you feel good. So it might be things like, I don't know, I'm a girl, aren't I? So maybe a face mask, maybe a little, some photographs, things that you enjoy looking at, like for example, like for me, obviously it'd be with Jacob and my dog Chewy. So things like that that you can actually practically do. Maybe something like a favorite book or a favorite poem, or something like a game that you enjoy playing. Anything like that is useful. Drawing, whatever floats your boat, basically. If you have a box like that, when you're not feeling great or you're lacking something to do, go and get it and use it and try and give yourself a bit of a break with it. But yeah, just, I suppose the general thing is I know it's a really worrying time, and it's hard to not get yourself stressed out. And believe me, I'm going to be honest, I was crying my eyes out yesterday because you do worry. Although I've managed not to cough for 17 minutes, that's great. But yeah, try and get yourself into a situation where you're nice and chilled and relaxed as much as you can be, whilst taking very necessary precautions. I'm not talking about pretending it's not happening, because we can't do that. But the more relaxed and the more well you are, the more likelihood you are of being resilient towards this, and being resilient towards getting through and getting other people through it. So take it nice and easy, and look for regular updates on our Facebook page with regards to centre closures, that kind of thing. We've got technology, it's fantastic. So, we can do Skype, we can do one-to-ones. We're even going to post exercise videos, and we probably will have a members only area where you can access specific classes, that you might be missing out on. Obviously, they'll have to be low equipment unless you've got your own trampolines at home. But yeah, so we're going to try and keep services going as much as possible. But yeah, thank you very much anyways. If anyone needs any support, please do give us a shout. Okay, thank you.